Hi, I'm Dee Bombani with Clean Skies News, and I'm joined here today by Tom Vinson. He's a Director of Regulatory Affairs at the American Wind Energy Association. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you.
Yesterday, the Interior Department issued 5 exploratory leases for offshore wind development. How significant are these leases?
It's a really critical step in building the offshore renewable industry here in the United States, and offshore wind in particular. There's more than 30 projects around the world in 8 different countries, all in Europe, and there's a number of other countries in Europe, a half a dozen or so, that are pursuing projects. So the U.S. really needs to start building a domestic manufacturing base and get some turbines in the water. And the leases for these Met towers is a critical step in the next phase in getting construction going as well. We're really appreciative of Secretary Salazar for getting this done.
Is this the farthest that we've gone as a nation to develop offshore wind?
Yeah, absolutely. It builds on what Secretary Salazar has already done this year in terms of prioritizing renewable development on public lands and in public waters, and negotiating with FERC to resolve the disputes over jurisdiction on offshore projects, particularly wave projects, not so much wind, and in finalizing the MMS regulations for offshore renewable development, which go into effect at the end of this month. So this builds on all of those prior actions and is the essential next step.
Now, what is the cost difference between an offshore wind farm and an onshore wind farm, and also the benefits and the disadvantages of both?
Sure. In general, offshore wind is going to be a little bit more expensive. I don't have specific numbers because there are no offshore projects here in the U.S., so it's a little hard to compare at this point. But in general, it's going to be a little more expensive because of the transportation and the construction costs and putting transmission on the seabed and that sort of thing, at least in the near term until we get more experience with it. The advantages of offshore wind are several. One, at least for the East Coast in particular, it's closer to load. So you have a lot of cities along the East Coast, so in terms of being close to load, dealing with shorter transmission, the ability to transport turbines from the coast out to the project, so there's shorter transportation and transmission, actually. And in general, offshore winds are steadier and stronger, so the amount of energy that you're going to be able to produce will be more. You can use larger turbines onshore, or offshore, I'm sorry. You know, onshore, the typical turbine is in the 1.5, 1.65 megawatt range. Offshore, there are 3, 5, 6 megawatt machines are pretty common, and there's one company that's testing a 10 megawatt machine, so the amount of energy for a given turbine is going to be a lot greater as well.
What about the regulatory hoops a developer has to jump through for onshore versus offshore?
Because the MMS rule is so new, we don't know exactly how it's going to work. We are supportive of how it's drafted, what it looks like on paper, but until we have more experience with how it's actually implemented, we can't really compare the onshore to offshore process, I think. You know, there are some definite legal differences in terms of competitive leasing and some other things that MMS is required to do by statute that BLM and Forest Service are not currently required to do. I think there's a 2-stage NEPA process for offshore that I think is slightly different than onshore. But again, until we see how that actually plays out on the ground, it's hard to say how that's going to work.
Right. Now, in the states, do you know if there are any wind facilities in the states of Delaware and New Jersey? I don't remember there being any.
The onshore wind potential in Delaware and New Jersey is pretty minimal, in particular in Delaware. There is one onshore facility in New Jersey near Atlantic City, which has a handful of turbines, a half a dozen or so. But offshore wind really is their greatest potential resource, and the governors and the state legislatures in both of those states have recognized that and have been supportive of growing that industry, both to meet their electricity needs, but also in hopes of building a domestic manufacturing base to serve the industry, which at the moment doesn't exist anywhere in the U.S.
Now, these meteorological towers that are going to be built off the coasts of Delaware and New Jersey, how important are those? You said it's a great first step, it's a significant first step, but you know, Secretary Salazar said that there is enough wind and the quality of wind off the Atlantic is pretty good. Has that never been tested before?
As with onshore wind, you have to put up a meteorological tower because, yes, we do have wind maps that but none of that has been done on a site-specific basis. So it's all very high-level data. And in order to site a wind project, you really have to know what the wind speed is at a given site or within a given area and verify that in order to get financing from a bank. No bank is going to finance a project just because an NREL wind map, National Renewable Energy Lab wind map, says that there is, class 4 wind speed there. You really do have to go do the site-specific studies, which I think may be a little different than some other technologies where the general resource maps may be more useful in terms of actual siting. So you could not do a project without putting up the Met Towers first.
Okay. And let me ask you this. There were some reports out of Bonn, out of the climate change meetings in Bonn, that showed that warranties are higher for offshore wind farms. Is that?
I haven't heard that specific data, but there are potentially issues with the impacts of water on the turbines themselves. Generally, the marine environment is considered a harsher environment to put in a turbine, but at the same time, the wind speeds are more steady, so in terms of the wear and tear from gusts and the variability of wind, that would actually be less on the turbines and the gears and that sort of thing. So I don't know for sure what data they're using to make that type of determination.
Right, okay. Well, I appreciate your being with us here today,
Sure.
Tom, and look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I'm Dee Bombani with Clean Skies News.